Although I grew up in the same city as my grandparents, they were not necessarily the grandparently type. Therefore, I had a pretty basic relationship with them. My parents always took us over to visit at least once a week, and every once in a while they would get all the grandchildren and do something special with us. It really wasn't until I was older and moved out that I found myself having a closer relationship with my grandparents. When my grandmother passed away back in 2001, I found my relationship really growing with my pawpaw. My pawpaw was a very small, thin man, and hard-headed and as strong-willed as they come. I've always been told that's where I get it from. Besides that, he was an extraordinary man who had accomplished so much in his life. He joined the Air Force at a young age and made it his career for over 20 years. He married my grandmother during his time in the service, and they had 3 children, my dad, my Uncle Steve, and my Aunt Kim. After traveling overseas and living in numerous states, he finally retired in the mid-1970s in Montgomery, Alabama. It was then that he began working as a computer programmer for a local hospital where he continued to work until he retired in the mid-1990s. My grandmother suffered from several different medical issues over the years, and he usually was taking care of her after he retired. He always found something to do with himself, though. I think he painted every room in his house each year to give himself something to do. He had an immaculate yard that was not going to have one leaf on the ground. If it did, then the tree had to go. I remember as a teenager the disappointment I could see in his eyes when I decided to drop out of high school. He never spoke a word about it to me, but that made it worse. I knew what he thought. It wasn't until about 2 years later, when I had bought my first house, when we really connected. As usual, he needed something to do, and he was very handy, so he spent day after day at my house with me, fixing it up and painting it before I moved in. I could tell he was proud of the direction I was going in life, but he was a man of few words. Later that year, my grandmother passed away, and we all thought he may go soon after. Never had I ever witnessed such a love for someone. He was in a deep depression, and there was little anyone could do. In my visits over the next year, I noticed someone would always call him. Never knew who it was, and he didn't say, but somehow the person was familiar with the rest of the family. Finally, at Thanksgiving, we were introduced to his friend, and by Christmas he was engaged. A little awkward at first, but my papa was happier than I'd seen him in a long time. I was willing to accept anyone that could bring life back to him. He was remarried the next year to a wonderful woman, now known to my little girl as Mimi. In 2005, when I graduated college with my bachelor's degree, he had to be the proudest person in the room. It meant the world to me to prove to him that I had it in me and that I would make something of myself after the disappointment I brought after dropping out of high school. In 2007, I married the love of my life, which he was also able to be there for. It meant the world to me, and is a day I will never forget. In 2009, I found out I was pregnant with our first child. My papa was determined it was going to be a boy. The rest of the family had only had girls at that point. Needless to say, it was another girl. Regardless, he was going to love her and spoil her. That fall, I graduated with my master's in counseling, and once again, he was there. This time I got a card from him saying a little more than I expected. Simply stated, he said, "Who would have ever thought the girl who dropped out of high school would go on to get a master's degree?" He was very proud of me. January 2010, as usual, he was looking for something to do. So I asked him if he would make a toy box for my little girl. The rest of the family thought he didn't need to be doing that, but if he wasn't doing that, he would be doing something else he wasn't supposed to be, so why not? He agreed, worked on it hard for over several months, searched to find the right hinges so the lid wouldn't smash her little fingers, and then brought it over finished a few weeks before the baby arrived. I was so excited and knew that this is something handcrafted that would be in the family for generations to come, something irreplaceable that meant the world to me. In April, my little girl was born, and 2 weeks later, my papa was told he had 99% blockage of the main artery to his heart, as well as blockages in 3 other arteries. Doctors were amazed he was still alive, let alone walking around. He was scheduled for a quadruple bypass surgery the next week, which he came through like a trooper. He really didn't want to have it done. His stubbornness was kicking in, but he did it. He was then scheduled to have a pacemaker put in a few days later, so they kept him in ICU until they were ready for the next procedure. The next Thursday, they successfully implanted the pacemaker, and he was doing well, until that night, when he suffered a massive stroke. Me and my 2-week-old daughter spent 3 weeks at the hospital day in and day out. I was not leaving him. After the stroke, he never came to, so after a week on life support and no signs of waking up, he was taken off life support. It was one of the hardest days of my life. As I look back, I am forever grateful for the good times that Mimi has brought to the final years of his life, as well as the time that we had together and the fact that he was here to meet my little girl. Now I just wish he were here to finally meet his first great-grandson. I know how much he always wanted one.